Yeah, so the dimensions of your garden beds is kind of often overlooked and people don't think it's a big deal. But really you can save yourself a lot of kind of heartache and trouble by getting it right. And so, yeah, moving to something that has really good access. Access is super important. And also in our climate, you really want to be not walking on your beds because it just compacts with the wet weather we have. So I would really strongly recommend moving towards a permanent pathway, permanent bed system, even if it's not a raised bed. As you can see behind me here, we've gone with 4-foot wide raised beds, and that can really help in terms of access, because with a 4-foot wide bed you can reach from both sides. So if you look here, I can lean in and easily get to here, and same from the other side. So we pretty much always make our raised beds around 4 feet. If you're up against a fence, you got to consider that you can't get to the other side, so I would shrink that down to maybe 3 feet if you have really long arms, or 2.5 if not. And then as far as the pathway goes, you know, it depends. If you have an intensive veggie garden, first thing I would ask yourself is, do you need to get a wheelbarrow in there? And if not, then you could even shrink it a little more. So here we've got roughly 2 foot, 26 inches. So I can fit it in there, and that way we can kind of dump in. But this is like the absolute minimum size of pathway if you need to get a wheelbarrow in. And I would call this a secondary pathway. A primary pathway is usually going to be more like 4 feet wide. Sometimes, if you have a lot of space, maybe even a little bit wider, but 4 feet I would say is primary pathway, where you can imagine multiple people walking down at the same time, side by side. And then secondary would be something more like this in the 2 to 3 foot range. And then tertiary pathways, if you have a really small space, it's fine to have a pathway width that's only 16 inches, and you can, as long as you can walk with your 2 feet, then you're okay. But that's really if you're short for space, would you go down to something like that. So somewhere in the 2 foot range is what we have here. Okay, so another consideration is the height of your bed. How tall should you build it? There's a few factors to consider there. One is sort of depth to either bedrock or really hard, lifeless subsoil. So if you've got, only 4 inches of dark stuff, and then your subsoil starts here and it's just rock hard clay, you really only have 4 inches to work with, and you're going to have to build up for that reason. So a general rule is 16 inches is kind of a good minimum to have for most vegetable gardens. 12 you can get away with some shallow rooted crops for sure, but you really do want 16 inches of good soil. So the other question is, well, what should I use for my raised bed? What type of material? And the answer is, it depends on a number of factors. Right now we're in April of 2021, and lumber prices have just gone up about quadrupled. So that's kind of crazy right now. What we've gone with in our yard here is these round timbers. They're just unprocessed tops of cedar trees, and we have kind of a source for those. So that's what we use for a lot of our clients, and then you can either put a slab end like this, a live edge slab, or we'll also just use rounds often for clients. So that's one option. Another one that's really standard is just wood, either 2x12, 2x6, 2x8, somewhere in there, and you can stack them as high as you want. So we do a lot of that. We'll usually try to use something that's really rot resistant, like cedar. And you can char the inside of them if you want as well, to get them to last a little bit longer. But wooden raised beds are a really common choice. Yeah, when it comes to pressure treated lumber, I mean, yes, it's going to last longer, but don't use it in your food gardens. It's not recommended. We follow on our organic land care standard put out by SOL, which is the Society for Organic Urban Land Care, and they have what is sort of like an organic standard for farmers, organic certification. They have a standard that you can follow as a landscaper, and in that you can go search for all these different materials, and they tell you whether they are considered organic or not, and treated lumber definitely fails. Another one is Galvalume, which is a manufactured product. It's corrugated kind of metal, and it's galvanized aluminum, and you can make raised beds out of them. We've done that lots for clients and put a nice top decking plate on it, and we do a little bit of wood framing just to kind of pin it all together. So that's an option. It's a pretty economical option, other than that the labor to put it together can be a little bit trickier. We've had some questions about, should we be worried about the galvanized process, but basically that's just zinc, and that's a micronutrient, so it's going to leach very slowly from the Galvalume, and it's probably just going to help your garden. Zinc is often a lacking micronutrients, so there's people who have grown with Galvalume, especially in Australia, for decades. There's no health concerns related to that. Other options are ferro cement, where we take a metal lath to form a whatever shape you want, basically, and then we mix up a concrete plaster and we plaster that on, and then you can paint it with an iron oxide pigment. That lasts a really long time, and it uses a very minimum amount of concrete, which is a product I generally don't like to use, but it lasts a really long time. You can make any shape you want. You can build in benches, and there's also very minimal footing work that's needed just because of the metal lath and the way it's laid. So a lot of concrete planters that you would build, you'd have to dig a 12-inch trench and compact road base into it and do all kinds of work like that, and you just don't have to do that with ferro cement. So it has a lot of advantages that way. Yeah, another advantage of ferro cement is that with the iron oxide pigment we use, we just mix up a equal amount of Portland cement with iron oxide pigment, and we've gone back to ferro cement beds we built 8 years ago that had kind of faded a little bit and were starting to look a little bit worn, and just mixed up a $10 can of iron oxide pigment and painted them on, and it just looks brand new again. So you can really renew them as often as you want and get that sharp color back. So another type of raised bed we use are galvanized horse troughs, and actually if we turn over here you can see one, which that one we've made a wicking bed out of. So it's got some peas in it right now. And so half of that, the bottom half of that, is a water reservoir, and the top half is a planter. And so that's another nice form of garden bed. That gives you, 2 feet of height, so it really is an architectural feature in the garden. Something you might put on a patio like we have over here, or we've used them for kitchen gardens for restaurants and things like that. They're a little more expensive for sure, but it's a nice feature.